Thank you, Tracy, and thanks to all of you for coming here tonight. And I'd also like to thank Carla Cohn, who I'm sad to say isn't here tonight. We haven't seen her in a long, long time, but we're grateful for the opportunity. As Tracy said, we undertook this book because we have grandchildren and we're concerned about possible health issues affecting them. We had been reading about all sorts of health issues among children. Cancer, childhood cancer, once a rarity, asthma, birth defects, and a whole range of neurological problems from ADHD and learning disabilities to autism and bipolar disorder. So we thought we'd look into it, and we did. We spent 5 years researching. We talked to scientists, we went through the literature, and we talked to a lot of families with sick kids. And what we found is what we think an epidemic of chronic childhood illness among America's children. And we found that evidence, which Alice will present to you in some detail a bit on, that this epidemic is linked to toxics in the environment, chemicals, heavy metals, nuclear wastes. We believe that the toxification of the environment will eventually become to be recognized as serious a threat to the viability of life on Earth as global warming has finally come to be. I started writing about global warming 30 years ago. My first story was in the New York Times, I think, in 1978. It's taken this long for the public to come to appreciate how serious a problem it is and how it's going to affect their children, their grandchildren, and future generations. We can't wait that long for us to address the toxic issue. We focused on children because people care about children, but they are only our canaries in the coal mine. We are all vulnerable. They will become sick first, but none of us is immune. We hope that our book will do something to pry the American public out of disbelief and inertia about this problem, and do something not only to protect their own children and families, but to take the action necessary to change the whole economic and political climate necessary to address this problem. We started out in Dixon, Tennessee, a small city right in the middle of Tennessee. We had heard about a cluster of birth defects from an organization that monitors such things. And let me just read a brief passage about what we found there. Where Dixon. On a Friday morning, early in May 1998, Judith Coode and her husband Gary accompanied their daughter Jenny to a hospital in Nashville, where Jenny was to give birth to a son. Mrs. Coode, an attractive middle-aged woman, and Miss Judy, to all, runs the Honey Tree Christian Daycare Center in Dixon. She was looking forward to the birth of her third grandchild. She and the baby's father and the father's mother were in the delivery room, and all seemed to be going well. Gary Coode waited in the hall. The attending physician kept up a cheerful, reassuring stream of talk as he assisted Jenny in her labor. Peyton, the child, came out face down. When Dr. Booker turned him over, he stopped talking, Judy recalled. He had his back to us, but when the nurse gave him a shove, he turned around and he had tears running down his face. The baby's face was badly disfigured, with a cleft lip and a bilateral cleft palate, and though she did not know it immediately, he also had a bad heart that failed to close, a valve that failed to close. Judy said of Peyton's palate, "My heart was in my throat. My husband walked into the room and put his arm around me, and we went into the hall. The first thing I said was, why would God do this to me? As much as I love children and work with them all my life, Why would he do this to me? My husband said, honey, this is not God's fault. Well, it wasn't God's fault. A couple of days later, she heard about another child in her neighborhood with a cleft palate that had just been born with a cleft palate. Then a woman called her school and said, can you accommodate a special case? The special case turned out to be a cleft palate of a newborn child, or recently born child. Judy put an ad in the paper saying, all parents in Dixon who had children with cleft palates born, please contact her. What she found was that 19 children had been born in a 2-year period with cleft palates in this little city. In a city that size, perhaps two could be expected in that period. And then at the advice of the organization that monitors these things, she got a map and put an X down near all the places where these kids were living. And most of them were clustered around the town dump. And it turned out the town dump had been accepting industrial waste, even though we weren't supposed to. A whole witch's brew of chemicals, including something called trichloroethylene, an industrial solvent that is known to cause many different physical problems, including the cancers that killed children in Woburn, Massachusetts, of a civil action fame, and as many as 122 children in the small city of Toms River, New Jersey. The state didn't do anything about it, but about 10 years later they investigated and found that indeed the groundwater was contaminated with this stuff and lots of other chemicals. But they said, well, we can't prove that this was caused by these chemicals. Just because there's a cluster of children doesn't mean that it was caused by these toxic chemicals in the water. Maybe just a random chance. Well, Dixon could be anywhere in America. Children everywhere in America are at risk from a witch's brew of toxics in their homes, in the soil, in the water, in the air, on foods. And basically, we really don't know how much is out there that can harm them because most of these chemicals have not been tested. We have been accused of being alarmist, but we present a massive amount of information. Studies on laboratory studies on test animals, epidemiological studies, new technologies that can examine the fingerprints of toxics on thousands of genes at a time. And the evidence is clear that this epidemic is being caused by, not entirely, there are many factors involved, but at least in part by toxics in the environment. And now Alice will present some of the evidence to you.
This is the way we wrote the book, and so we each took responsibility for different subjects. This was my subject. We found out that this all started with the baby boomer generation, the first generation born just as this new chemistry was being introduced to America. And these baby boomers had lindane to kill lice in their hair, and they literally cavorted through DDT on their streets. And as they begin to give birth, these numbers begin to arrive in America. The baby boomers themselves are now evidencing some of the illnesses that take many years to develop, such as Parkinson's and breast cancer and prostate cancer. So it's among their kids that these statistics have piled up. 1 in every 3 American children is suffering from some kind of chronic childhood disease. Again, we can't say that every single one of them is linked to a toxin, but we can say an awful lot of them are. The cancer used to be a rarity, and now every year since 1950, when chemicals were first introduced in a big way, every year it's gone up 1%. So in that period, it's gone up 67%. The U.S. is 4th in the whole world in childhood cancer rates. Asthma has more than doubled since 1980. Autism, according to a very careful study in California, has gone up since 1980, 273%. 1 out of every 150 kids, mostly a great percentage of them boys.